Speaker, and as judges, members of opposition, it's an honor to be in the panel. So our case today is that our House believes that states should criminalize the seeking of male organ bribes. So it means that we are against and we want to criminalize the cases when you're seeking with the help of internet or in another way for a woman who will become your wife from poor countries and you are a person from a rich country. Actually, in order to explain why we are against it and why we do want to criminalize it, we want to show the problem of poor countries where there are women who cannot solve their basic problems, who cannot solve the problem of poverty, and the only things they find applicable in order to find a better living is to sell themselves. Instead of protecting, struggling, and standing for their own women's rights, female rights, they understand that it is better to sell yourself to leave the poor country where you are living for a better living. So we understand that these women who have already done it, who do it, they give a bad example for little girls who are growing, for other women that are living in these poor countries, because they understand that you should not struggle for your right for education or for a good job or something else. It is better just to put your picture in the internet, to go to the companies that allows it, and to sell yourself to a man from the Western country or from another rich country. Actually, this is the first problem. The second problem is that when we're talking about mail order brides, we understand that we have a similar case as prostitution. Why? Because you neglect and destroy the rights of women. She just becomes a good, a service, something that you can buy, and that is all. So it is simply for you to buy, and these women actually do not have a freedom of choice like in normal negotiations, in normal relationships, when you can look at the man, say whether you like him or not, then you have relationships, he brings you flowers and so on, and on the end you build up your relations, and on the end you make the decision to break up with his wife. No, you just put your picture or something else in another way, but actually you do not even know who will buy you, because not who will marry you, but definitely who will buy you. That is the main problem. And at the same moment, we can say that it is similar actually to slavery and to human trafficking, because there is always someone who stands behind these companies, these websites, and so on. We do not know whether she did it by her own will, or she was actually, or it was actually despite her will. Perhaps she was blackmailed or something else, so she has fears. That's why she agrees to become one of those goods or services on this website where a rich guy will search for her. Yes, please.
So, when you get to the country of West, you are protected by the laws. You're not already no more a slave. You have the protection of the laws. You can actually have access to legal protection. So you're not a slave, even in your case.
Okay, thank you very much. We're not telling that you become a slave, but actually your whole life you will think of only one thing: to be a good wife. Or in other case, you will be sent back to your poor country, to that trash, I'm sorry, where you have lived before. So that your whole life, you cannot stand for your opinion in your family life, you cannot stand for your rights and so on. The case of family, so we have a family, and in this family, a man who bought you thinks that you are his wife, but not his woman, actually. That is the problem that we are discussing. We are discussing that when tomorrow these two people will have children, yes, and the child will ask, Mom, Dad, how did you got acquainted? The father will say, I have bought your mother on the website, and actually she was sent to our country in a box, yes? So actually what we want to explain is that in this case, you will make, you destroy the mind, the psychology of a for child. And what is more, you show to your children from the early childhood the main principle of your family, unequality of male and female rights. Your children are grown up understanding that man is someone who can stand for his rights and a woman cannot stand for her opinion and rights, because she should be a good wife, because she will have a fear of coming back to her poor country. Why I mentioned that it is a kind of prostitution? Because it is a real long-term prostitution. Long-term, but not endless, not constant. Because one day you can be sent back, and actually, when a woman was chosen not because of your not because of your visual forms, because of your mind, because of ability to talk, to contact, and because of the feeling. She was just bought because someone has a criteria of a woman that he wants to see near him, and he asks some people, or finds on the website such a person. Additionally, we want to say that we have a problem that this woman who says that she will live in a society where these rights are protected, but actually we have a problem that people who know, for example, relatives or family of that man who bought, they will know that this woman was found on this website, and she was brought from a poor country, and they will see in their eyes she also will be just a good or a service. Do you remember the film, the book Atlas Shrugged? There was a case when one of the heroes, he found a poor girl and he decided to make her his wife in order to show that he is good. And what is more, all the society always saw in her not a woman, not a wife of this rich guy. They always saw a good or a service that he found in the street and he bought. That's why our position, the position of the government, is that we are definitely against this, and we want to criminalize it because it is similar to those crimes like prostitution, human trafficking, and slavery. And what is more, it neglects and destroys all the fundamental rights of women for which the Western countries are standing for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for the fine speech, and I call upon the Leader of Opposition. Hear, hear.
I got an impression from the government that rich people should only marry rich people, that it is somehow bad for people to meet someone from a different part of the world, someone who comes from a different background, and they should have no possibility to do so because they will always label it as a kind of prostitution. And to some extent, that always happens in a marriage with inequality of finances, but we are strongly opposing the current situation because we think it brings benefits to both the women, to those women who would be subjected to human trafficking otherwise, and also to the men. We believe it's a great thing, and we are happy to oppose that motion. We believe that these women will not sell themselves, okay? So that's a huge misunderstanding. You decide whether you want to become a part of this program. There are so many women that want to leave these countries that you so wonderfully described as trash, that you have not only to be good looking, but also someone whom the man will decide that he wants to have children with, right? You also have to have conversation, you also have to be intelligent, and so on and so on. It's also about personal traits, not only about you good looking, although we agree that it is a huge part of it. Secondly, you can get divorced, right? You can do many things. You are in a country where law actually exists, where it functions, and when abuses happen, there is a legal protection on you. So we believe you are not a slave, you are not a prostitute, and you may decide about what is best for you. And if, as you said, there are people for whom it is the best choice that may have, that is kind of sad. And we'd like to see the world in which everyone earns the same, but maybe someday. For now, what they can do is they can go to the other countries and live with people that commit to be their husbands. Okay, so firstly, it is the only way to do it legally, and it will happen, otherwise it will happen on a black market, as it used to happen for thousands of years. We believe that by currently, and by promoting even these websites, which we think function well, we are depriving mafia of a huge source of revenue. We also limit the numbers of human trafficking when women are transported in humiliating conditions, where they are many times raped, when they don't know whom they will meet with, when they have no legal protection, and also when they are in the country illegally, so they cannot go to a policeman and report my husband is raping me, because they are illegal, otherwise they will be deported back to Mexico or to other place. So that is the situation, that is what they have to bring us answer to. If someone wants to buy a wife, he will do it anyway. We want to give them legal protection, we want to know what the address of this guy is, and so on and so on. Also, marriage is kind of different than just a prostitution that happens overnight. You give this woman your name, you do it publicly, so we don't believe that this is as problematic as they portray. Secondly, we believe it is every person individual right to capitalize on your best assets. If it's your youth or you're good looking, why shouldn't you have right to do it? You have the right to do anything that nature gave you, be it intelligence or great legs, and anything you want to achieve success. We believe that liberal countries should acknowledge that and give people the right to decide what kind of life they want to have. We believe that it may only bring benefits to those who have no other means of achieving economic prosperity. Go.
Do you think certain actions by women can feed into some overall stereotypes about women being objects that have to move from the ground?
Well, some may, but you are not showing us why it is happening worse when it is illegal, right? We are showing you that here at least you have legal protection. Secondly, we believe that it is better to allow women from poor countries to do it, because when you are a poor American, you are still a relatively rich person, and someone who wants to have a trophy wife will have a trophy wife anyway, but we have the benefits of international flow of money to the poorer countries and helping those who are in desperate need. So we don't see it as a bad thing. Okay, so there's a problem of legality and about the right to capitalize on what you have. Thirdly, we believe that mixed marriages are good. They bring cultural enrichment to the countries, and also that people are raised by mothers more than are they by men, so they have emotional attachment towards them. They are likely to understand their situation, that have deep conversation with them, to understand what is their choice to go to flee their country. But also, the men who marry people from Thailand are less likely to be racist once they have half children that is also of some color, right? You have to introduce it to your friends and so on. You spend time with your wife in public. So we believe that you're having some understanding of this group of people, and you will stand against when someone in your company is telling terrible things about this group of people, because now your wife is of it. You have members of your family that are of this ethnic background. So we believe that it's a very good thing. It's definitely better than the next blonde kind of playboy girl that doesn't promote anything. So we also believe that having someone who was poor in your country, in your family, makes you understand what poverty is like. So these men are more likely to promote social programs and to share their wealth with the poor as well. We believe this will be happy marriages, because the success of company depends on it. So wives have to be not only good looking, but also be be able to raise children, they will send money back to their families, and they will help those members of the families that stayed in the countries to get to the States legally, which means that once you're a member of your family is, let's say, in the United States, you are more likely to get green visa, and so on and so on. So they will not be subjected to human trafficking as well, but it will be easier to migrate. And we believe that the men who sacrifice their youth for financial success also have right to have marriages. They are all very often shy, they want to go to clubs, they have friends only from work, and internet connects people from all over the world. So why do we exclude these men? We believe that it's everyone's right to have children and to achieve happiness in that way, and we are happy to see them having these wives. Very happy to all.
Instead of being an educated person which realizes its own interests. Moreover, they tell us she can help her own society by sending money over there. And what are the values which are being transferred to those societies? These are the values that a great wife has been bought as a great wife to another state where she fulfills just the functions of wife, which helps you in your own society. By those diminishing the values and the freedoms of women in those societies which they are taking from. Second of all, they tell us that there in any case will be black market. But we believe that if this case doesn't exist, basically rich people majorly won't go into the radical means of human trafficking in order to have some Thai or Chinese women. Moreover, we believe that the majority of them want to have children. That's why they will have to have wives, and wife is kind of public person which can be transferred from country to country illegally and hidden easily because where you have children from, right? Second of all, we believe that when we are selling the women as a bride, there is a point of advertising during this selling. We are represent them during the features which are necessary by the men who are buying them. What we are telling you? We are telling you that who is more likely to be bought? The more likely person to be bought is the person who has ability to cook, ability to grow children, being pretty handsome, and doesn't argue with the husband, right? And in the majority of cases, we create a social understanding of a woman which is being bought, like a tool with some specific kinds of features. Moreover, they are being competing among one another, not knowing who is the direct husband of them, but being competing through these features. When they are showing that these features are the main, they are undermining the basic standards which we are having in our society. You know, they tell us that the women, they can use their rights. We don't believe it because we include them into develop the societies, right? But there are the points of hard pressure. First of all, when you live in the society, why we think this is just like slavery? When you live within the society, when your level of life is low and when you live very poor, you basically don't have any real choice when you decide whether you live or not, because majority of people see this as the only option for their survival. That's why that's why they have the power over them when they are taking them from them. But what is more important, even if they have rights written on paper in these European states, that they are unable to fulfill their rights. Right. First of all, they tell us they can be divorcing. Okay, they have divorced, and she comes into the society. She didn't live within, she knows no language, knows no culture, has the lack of education to find any specific job, and she is just thrown like a trash to the end of living. She is absolutely sure to be suffering the other life. And the majority of those women will understand this fact to the rest of their life. Because first of all, they are being scared of two things. That they won't be able to survive in this society on their own. And second of all, that they are going to be sent back by their master, their husband. That's why we believe that this is total slavery. Moreover, some of them feel obliged to the men who have purchased them and took them away from all the suffering they had before. That's why some of them will rationally refuse all their basic rights. And what do we have as the result? We have a person who cannot choose in the beginning. We have a person who cannot reject because of rational and objective options in the end. What is this called? This is called the slavery, when you do what your master says, all your level of life or all your welfare goes away. This is what we call slavery. And in these places, the man will have the ultimate power over those women, which means that they can be and are more likely in the majority of cases to be suffering from the lack of the rights. But what is more important, we include these cases of suffering by the women in the society where there usually is no such a suffering, and where in which societies we have generally tried to break down all those principles, and there are also women who are struggling for the minor rights, but the minor rights go away when the struggle from the major rights come up in front again. This is the step backwards when we're talking about the women's rights in these developed societies. So first of all, we believe that this is just the same as the slavery. Second of all, we believe that this is basically not only makes you an understanding of being both like a tool, but makes you a tool. But before I take it,
We are rating people constantly. Why is it worse than Tinder, or would you criminalize it as well?
once more, please.
We are rating people constantly in our everyday life. Why is it this case especially rating people, like seeing they good looking, whether we talk with them well,
Okay,
and so on?
because these are the only options. You don't speak with the person, you don't interact with the person, you simply buy the person which is necessary to you. And moreover, you are more likely to buy the person which fills in without freedom for women, without the women's rights, without saying no to your husband. When the husband hits her at home, she will less likely to go to the police because she will be afraid of far more than a prison to her. Even if her husband goes to prison, in this case, her life ends. She is left with nothing, and this is just the same to the slavery. But moreover, we believe that if we buy something like a tool, there is a social understanding that this one is a tool. And when one woman is being realized as a tool, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one who have not been bought can be understood as a tool that can be bought. A child of a woman who was bought may understand that the mother was bought like a good. The society who will know that the man have bought his Thai, Somali or other girlfriend will understand that this woman was bought. The husband will understand that he is the mother of the situation and he was bought. This creates the ultimate stigma. The suffering on the one side of the person who is just not living but surviving, but moreover by creating the standard that nowadays in the developed societies actually you can't ignore women's rights. Actually there is a legal way, and we believe that there is not. If you want to have a wife, find a wife that will basically have a chance to stand for her rights. Thank you.
I thank the first half of the debate very much for the speeches and the deputy of the opposition particulars. And I call upon the second half of the debate to start with the member of government. You're here.
Half of this debate has been about the individual impact to male worker rights. In closing government, we think that the debate is much larger than this because we think that the perceptions associated with male worker rights affect all women, and these impacts are significantly larger than the ones brought in the opening half of this debate. Most rebuttal will sort of be in direct sort of clash to things that we've already heard, and there's some rebuttal in the middle of it, right? So I'm going to talk about sort of like how we think that this is a strong signaling effect of like that the government has that can like change the perceptions. And like I'm going to talk about sort of the harmful perceptions that are going to change as a result of the model that we propose, both in terms of women and in terms of countries that are associated with sort of male ordered rights. And I'm also going to like balance this against sort of like the sort of best case of the opening opposition, right? So first of all, the signaling effect. We think that the government has the power to set norms and change perceptions, right? We say that like when you put the power of the government behind a certain issue, it's very powerful, right? If you read in the newspaper that Parliament bans mail order bribes, it sends a very strong message that the government doesn't think that this is okay. We think that this is especially true when most people would agree with this legislation in the first place. We say that mail order bribes are a minority in all cases, and like are often stigmatized to the extent that people wouldn't actively oppose this legislation in the first place, right? So we think that there wouldn't be any sort of like opposition to getting this through, right? And we think that the fact that this legislation will be welcomed is really important because we think it has the impact of change perceptions. So again, mail order bribes constitute a small minority, but the fact that we are even discussing this clearly shows that people see it as an issue and know that they exist, right? We think that there are significant problems with this because the failure of the state to intervene indicates tacit support of this social institution, which we think is harmful. We think this is bad because it feeds into negative gender and cultural stereotypes in terms of like what people see these mail order bribes as being, and like we think that people have sort of a tendency to generalize and therefore associate sort of all women or all women or are all sort of specific women of certain ethnicities with these behavior, right? Rasmuss brought this up in a point of commission, and we didn't really get a response. So I'm going to sort of flesh this out now, right? So when it comes to women, right, we think that the problems associated with the social institution of mail order bribes is we get sort of a stereotype of self-objectification, where it's possible to say that women, some women, are willing to trade sex for wealth, right? We also see that there's this stereotype of general sort of sexual promiscuity and sort of a lack of concern for valuable relationships, right? We think that a lot of people can point to say this is sort of the way women are, right? The reason as to why it's so powerful when you can point to this is, as the opening opposition said, is that these specific women are making this active choice and are saying that they wanted to do this, right? But we say that the majority of women don't want to do this, and we don't think that they should be associated with this in any way, right? We say that like when you sort of like remove the ability to do this, right? When you remove sort of tacit government support for the social institution, it becomes more difficult to fuel these sorts of stereotypes both publicly and in private, right? We think it's more difficult for men to sort of have nasty locker room talk about like when sort of men discuss women say this, women want this is what they sort of they want to do because like, I know this because many of them are mail order brides. We say that the impact of this is that it stigmatizes other forms of exploitation, right? By specifically by men. We think that when the government puts this sort of like heft like behind this sort of feminist issue, it's harder for men to be open about the fact that like I'm going to go to this like strip club sort of like after work, or the fact that like I think like it sort of is able to change sort of conceptions and the way that people talk about consent, right? We think that this extends to things like sort of cultures of sexual assault. We think it becomes a lot more difficult to talk openly about these things, and we're going to have to stigmatize these things, right? So the thing is, when opening opposition also sort of say like you know this model isn't going to solve anything because there's going to be a black market, we say that in response to that, that is maybe true, and we think that there probably will be a black market. But we say that like this black market is driven by a demand that requires a belief and like a belief and buying into the stereotypes that are caused by mail order brides in the first place, right? So we say that by weakening these stereotypes, we undercut any illicit demand for mail order brides, which means that any existing black market that we may have is probably going to be significantly smaller than the market that currently exists. We also say this has like an impact on sort of mail order brides that are associated with like specific countries, right? We say that mail order brides are sort of associated with, for instance, like Europe, or at least like this is the perception that people have, and that perception is very harmful, right? We say that in Western Europe and, for instance, the United States of America, offensive and harmful stereotypes of specifically Eastern European women are rampant, right? Specifically, they are the ones that supposedly self-objectify. Specifically, they are the ones that sort of like live sort of in poverty, right? There's a stereotype of desperation that affects the way people see these countries and people from these countries, right? We say that this stereotype, there's also a stereotype that the countries themselves are unconcerned with sort of feminist issues, even though the legislation of like Eastern European countries and Western European countries in regards to this issue are identical. We think that this affects treatment of migrant minorities like in sort of Western Europe. We think that people sort of feel that they have a claim over specifically these women's bodies because they see these stereotypes as being true because some women choose to make these decisions. We say that, for instance, it is the fact that sexual assault towards minority women is significantly higher in these countries because people have different expectations of what these women want, and we think this is really bad. And we think that we solve this by targeting specifically these stereotypes when we take action, and we say that the government isn't okay with this, and that this is a social institution that should be taboo. Yes?
third wave feminists emphasize that it's okay for women to not be ashamed of their bodies and use anything they want to success.
So
why would you limit them from doing that?
Thank you. So the thing is, like, again, like, okay, like, I mean, like, I'll go on to, like, this idea of sort of, like, balancing, like, what we aren't saying that these women are, like, sort of illegitimately wanting this, right? But we say that you have to balance the impact that their decisions have on other perceptions and the way that that affects other women, right? So the thing is, like, opening opposition, for instance, like, want to talk about how, like, these women live under, like, sort of bad conditions. But we say that those bad conditions are fueled by the stereotypes that are perpetuated by governments not taking action against male-ordered brides, right? So again, like, the benefits they want to talk about in terms of the freedom of these women and sort of like the benefits, like the sort of material benefits that they get, are very, very small because they are only as large or as significant as the number of people that choose to be male-ordered brides. Like, the opposition becomes stronger the more people choose to make these decisions. But since not a lot of people are making these decisions, the stereotypes that it creates affects literally everybody else. And at the end of the day, we think that, like, in sort of like the balancing act, we think it's like it's better to side on, like, the majority of women that choose to not make these decisions, and also undercutting the root cause that leads people into making these sorts of decisions in the first place. For all these reasons, we're happy to propose.
I thank the member of government, and I'd like to hear from the member of opposition. Here.
So the state doesn't have, or states across the world, don't have great histories when it comes to trying to control who and why we marry. Right? States are very poor actors in terms of making that decision. And from our side, that's what we stand for in Syria. We want to take a step back from that process and stop delegitimizing individuals who consensually form relationships. 2 points in the speech. Firstly, addressing what CG just said. We think that this policy is emblematic of a wider set of regressive policies that try and control the way that women use their bodies, and policies across the world that demonize female sexuality. And we think that states should take a step back when possible in regulating how people form relationships. And second of all, I might give you some extra comparative analysis on the male-ordered brides themselves to clear up the top half, and they are the most vulnerable actors in this debate, and show you how they're much better in these relationships. But let's do some feminism, okay? So, they tell us this policy, that male-ordered brides entrenches the idea that women are objects that you can buy, and we need to tackle that as a state because we have a strong signaling effect. Now, on the scale of factors for contributing to mass objectification of women, male-ordered brides that we all need clarification on is probably little down the list, right? We have sexist advertising companies and Donald Trump who are already informing that decision for us. But the state's banning these sites because we are uncomfortable, morally uncomfortable, because this is one of those kind of things, morally uncomfortable with sovereign women consensually selling their bodies is a regressive stance to take, right? We think that across the world, first of all, it's a big one problem, across the world, illiberal groups in states that have laws in place that prevent women from choosing what to do with their bodies often point to those existing laws and policies to justify and legitimize other regressive policies that aim to prevent or to preserve, like, the sanctity of the nuclear family and to repress female sexuality. It's exactly the way that prostitution laws across the world preserve the idea that female sexuality and promiscuity is dirty, that it's undesirable, that it's something to be ashamed of. And it's very difficult to break down, thank you, that perception when you have laws in place that restrict a woman's right to choose how she sells her body. And look, they go, look, or how she decides to enter relationships, right? So they're saying, look, economic incentives to form relationships are illegitimate. We don't think that's true. We think we make relationships based on economic decisions all of the time. So we don't think that necessarily the financing is too coercive an aspect. And we firmly believe the states should take a step back from trying to regulate women's decisions in their body, especially on the way that women from abroad and foreign countries decide to use their body, because this policy, at its core, is based, no thank you, on an outdated morality that demonizes the way that people form relationships and express their sexuality. And because these women don't have the legal protection of a marriage, and so given that, and given that women who enter these relationships do have the legal protection, equal legal protection in the marriages that they form, we don't think this is a legitimate policy to be supporting. So we don't think this is a sphere that any state has ever had any success in trying to regulate, and two, that it should be intervening. So let's respond to some of our points. Yeah,
you tell us that we are repressing sexuality, but the point is that we are repressing everything else except the sexuality of the women and only womanly features while we are buying women.
Okay. So I think CG probably put this a little bit better when they said signaling, right? That essentially what this does is, if you allow these sites to exist, then this is a tacit support of this institution, and that's bad because what you condone, what you're not condoning is the stereotype of self-deprecation and the idea of you trading sex for wealth. And these are bad things in society that we shouldn't be encouraging, right? Stereotyping of self-deprecation and the trading sex for wealth are bad. Note, the fact that we think it's self-deprecating for women to use their bodies to advance their economic position is exactly the problem we're trying to solve in this debate, right? Individuals' bodily autonomy and their sovereignty is the one thing that the state is most ill-placed to create signalling effects on. And then they go, but look at all the negative stereotypes this is perpetuating, right? Look at all these women that come from the poor countries, we now have this negative idea. Look, the fact that, and then they go, we don't want to legitimize this stereotype, so we need to ban these institutions. But that's not a reason. So we want to ban these sites so that those individuals don't have to confront their own archaic views of the way that female sexuality works, right? So if they acknowledge that those signaling effects are there, and they acknowledge that there are groups in society who, when they think about female sexuality and trading your body for wealth, the idea of self-deprecation when it comes to using your female sexuality, if they are using that as a basis to create a policy that appeases those groups because they do have those concerns, then that's not a policy we should be supporting, because we shouldn't be supporting the whims and the desires of those groups who just feel morally uncomfortable with the idea that women could use their bodies to advance their position in society, right? And that's kind of where we stand on this, because we don't think, exactly for the reason they told us, which is this policy will appease those people who are uncomfortable with the idea of women's bodies selling themselves. That is exactly why we need to allow these things to exist, because we'd rather confront that, we'd rather confront those biases, confront those stereotypes, rather than trying to ban them to appease those people who are the people who are keeping the same archaic laws on prostitution, on female rights, across other aspects of society. That's the one point. Just clearing up the just extra analysis on the mail order brides themselves. Look, in the types of countries we're talking about, Indonesia and Bali and Thailand, the type of woman who's willing to sell her body on a mail-order bride website is also the type of woman that probably will also engage in the sex industries in those areas, right? So so if you look at sex tourism in Thailand, and so you can get the Thailand mail-order brides and the Thailand sex tourism industry, two very different, right? If you look at that just as a pure comparative, would you rather these women be able to get into a marriage with someone where they move out of that, they have legal protection with one person, or having maybe 30 or 40 clients in a year who don't necessarily have that buy-in, the incentive to protect or to respect that individual in that relationship? Because the good thing about marriage is that it does give you legal protection, and you do get some sort of recrimination or damages if there's any sort of abuse in that relationship. They don't have those protections in their host countries, in Indonesia, in Bali, in Thailand. If we're looking at it from a state point of view, it'd be very difficult to kind of justify, if we can say, look, actually, we're bringing 5,000 mail-order brides out of the sex industry in Thailand and Bali, we're bringing them into the society and giving them legal protection. We don't think that losing that benefit under the premise that, we're going to have a signalling effect, we don't think that trade-off is actually fair. We think that if we are protecting the rights much better of those 5,000, 6,000 women, that the signalling effect isn't necessarily an argument to compare, so we beg you to oppose.
We thank the member of opposition very much. It is time to hear from the women.
reduction in these forms of exploitation actually benefits women more. So on the first point, I think that the opening half in this debate are like discussing whether like this might be beneficial or not for these women specifically, or whether these relationships might be like good relationships, bad relationships, etc. But we expand this debate significantly, right? Because we don't think that it's only about like these specifically these relationships, right? We think that like these type of benefits feeds into various types of stereotypes that people have about women, right? So when men go online and they work, so like they can see that they can purchase women, it feeds sort of like specific stereotypes afterwards move into society. And then Jesper, I think, nails it, right? When he talks about the fact that these kind of norms are specifically affected, specifically because of what opposition says in this debate, right? That this was women's choice, right? They wanted to do this, right? Just they themselves as independent agents who sort of like went out there and were willing to marry this rich guy, right? We think that this feeds into the type of stereotypes that women do only want to find a rich husband, right? They do only want to have money. They do only want to have they do only want to achieve sex through this type of like marriage with these people, right? And we think that like this can have, as Jesper says, a signaling effect in terms of like significantly changing the perceptions, right? It changes like your perception towards women at work, women that you as a man living in your society meet, right? Types of specifically the type of perception that you sort of have towards them. Right? But secondly, and this is very important, Jesper tells you that this has a specific signaling effect towards how it is that the government treats like feminist ideas, etc., etc. Now, closing opposition responds to this by saying, yeah, but it's actually the other way around. That we are feeding the stereotype that women, we are actually feeding the stereotype that women are agents, right? Because we are banning a specific thing, right? But notice the way that men see women, as Jesper tells you, isn't like as agents. The way that men see women is as women who are seeking specific gain for themselves at the cost of like using men, right? And the problem is that when men see like these women from these countries doing this, right, they associate this with every other woman, right? So they don't care that much about the fact that this exists, right? What they can care is when government takes a specific stance, right? Because that over long term means that like people just have less of these use. So at the end of this point, right, it might be true that that this is a free choice for these women, that they can take this choice. It might be true that these families can benefit. But thinking on our side of the house, the harms of stereotypes towards women, on the work, like women in general, are so significant. And notice that it isn't like the comparative isn't as closing opposition tells you, right? That we can help these families, right? And this like one ban is not going to have that big of an impact. Because these type of bans and these type of government actions have huge impact over long term, right? So when you ban one thing, right, you have people in culture who sort of like grow up and this thing has become illegal, right? So people are less exposed to that stereotype and like just hold better views for women, right? So it isn't just like comparing like a few hundred women who use this practice versus like minor impacts of stereotype of stereotyping this, right? The impacts are actually huge. Secondly, the negative perception. Because opening opposition are kind of like, you should have a right to use your legs. You're young and beautiful. Why can't you just like find them and use them? We think the problem is that only the women who find husbands in this way are women who benefit from this. We think that there is a huge number of women who are like specifically immigrant women, right? Filipino women in the United States, right? Eastern European women in the United Kingdom who are trying to build their lives, who are trying to make careers, women of different ethnicities who sort of like are trying to make careers in this world, right? So what happens now? When you apply for a job as a woman, right? You are seen as a woman who's just like a gold digger, right? For example, we think that if you are successful as a woman, right? You are seen. People assume that you are successful because you were able to marry a rich husband in a sense, right? They say that these men who marry these women are going to be less racist, right? But every other single person who didn't marry these women are not going to be less racist, right? They are going to see these women who are trying to like build their careers, achieve success, as someone who's just like seeking money to improve their lives. So women from these lives find it harder to achieve like success in life in general, right? Because they don't only face the regular glass ceiling that women have, they face glass ceiling and also stereotyping that they are gold diggers from this country. We think that that's extremely hard. Then they say, yeah, but these countries are sort of like racist, right? and it's sort of like better for these women to get out of this. So firstly, notice how true these women who get out have better lives, but all the women who are left behind there still have to face these sexist stereotypes. But they become worse, right? Because the world now sees the women and people who come from this country as someone who just want to exploit them for the fact that they are rich, right? We think that this leads to the type of xenophobic stereotypes that we have towards immigrants, right? We think that this means that we're less likely to have governmental foreign policy agenda to make these countries to improve the situation of women on the ground, right? We think that when people go to islands, right, they're more likely to commit sexual assault because that is how they see these women, right? As women who are adulterers, as women who are objects. And we think that that is bad. So then at this point, right, we think that we sort of make it harder for minority women to succeed. This type of norm makes it harder for minority women to succeed, right? And we sort of think that this makes these issues worse, right? And if some women have a right to do this, right, we think it's significantly worse on our side of the house. Thirdly, about exploitation, right? We think that they say their main contention on this point is that this will create black markets. So notice how it's very contradictory when opening up scene says that these guys are super shy, right? So they're going to go and buy women on the black market, right? From organized crime. We think that this is ridiculous, right? But notice how when Jesper talks about the fact that we weaken stereotypes towards this, right? It means it just makes it less likely that this market will arise, right? And we think that there's a huge difference between our women who are bought in this way when this is legal and when this isn't legal, right? But the big issue, and the reason why this is important, right? Because this isn't about only women who are sold, right? This is about culture of exploitation. This is about men who go to strip clubs, men who buy prostitutes, etc., etc. We think that these type of things, people think these type of things are okay to do, right, on their side of the house, right? And while it might be true that some women are sort of better off, right, we think that we help to tackle those stereotypes. So, because this is better for women, we're very proud.
Thank you very much, Reverend Smith. As you finish this debate on the poll, I call upon the opposition whip. Hear, hear.
For example, if they're in this position whereby they feel they need engage with mail order services, they are likely to continue pursuing sex work in their native country, as John told you. They will not be protected by the laws of the Western democracies and will ultimately be left more vulnerable. And that's the main point. We want to focus on these women in general and their rights and making sure that they're not as vulnerable. So the government argued, I think, that mail order brides are bad role models for women, and this sets a bad precedent and bad signaling. To which John made another really important point. It's not the role of the state to tell women that what they can or cannot do with their bodies. If anything, this motion creates a worse sentiment for women. It tells girls across the country that women should not have sovereignty over their own bodies and shouldn't be allowed to pursue careers in the form of the male bride services industry, which is an industry and it is a career in itself, if they want to, no thank you. Any policy that dictates specifically what women should and shouldn't do legitimizes the idea that women should be dictated to by third parties and that we shouldn't be sovereign, we shouldn't have sovereignty over our own bodies in and of ourselves. It also, no thank you, legitimizes this judging idea that women should be judged for themselves specifically because they are women. It oppresses women and, more importantly, it legitimizes that oppression and encourages it to spread. Ultimately, states shouldn't regulate women's bodies or restrict their individual sovereignty. Sex work and the male bridal industry, which epitomizes this, itself isn't the problem. The problem is the violation of women that it targets. No, thank you. And the government ignores this. Actually, I'll take you.
Anyway, the women are more likely to end up as prostitutes in poor states because those who have failed to be bought are more likely to become prostitutes, and the social stereotypes within the states work for each and every one woman within the states. I mean that the basic social stereotypes of women being bought and sold working within the state where she can be a prostitute is more likely to influence far more women to become the prostitutes.
Okay. Well, we don't necessarily think that prostitution is a bad thing, and the fact that we're dictating the fact that prostitution is a bad thing shows that we judge women and that we think that it's okay to judge women for what they want to do in their career if they want to pursue just because they are women. So we don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Plus, I mean, the women that are bought and then become brides aren't just brides for the rest of their lives, right? They can do really positive things in society and bring really good influences to the communities in which they're bought, which will potentially improve the perception of women within those societies. So we think that's a good thing. So anyway, furthermore, what John tells you, and this goes deeper into the argument, is that women shouldn't be taught themselves that they need to be afraid of their own sexuality, or that they should be vilified for using this simply because they are willing. Women should feel they can use their bodies, use their sexuality in any which way they want to, and they shouldn't feel like they should be made villains for that. And they shouldn't basically feel afraid for their own bodies and afraid to use their bodies in any way they want to. So the last 2 points of clash I'm going to have to go through really, really quickly. So the second one is, no thank you, the role of the state within this. So we think it's better for the state to oppose this motion, as we don't want to try to draw this weird moral line that depicts whether consensual relationships are legitimate or not. And we don't think this is coherent with free societies with democratic processes, and it's really contradictory to the states themselves, which is probably a bad thing. The last point of clash is that it's better for the people involved and the men who are responsible. The responsibility of the men involved, rather. So the government thinks that we are enslaving these women, but we disagree. When they're married within these societies, they have the same rights as their husbands themselves, which is important. It means they're not being enslaved. And we also think that it's great for these men to be happy, and otherwise they probably have to fly to these foreign countries of the world and use those services of prostitution, where the women would not have the same rights or means as they would in the West and democracies that they need to be going to. So for those reasons, we beg you to oppose.
I thank you all very much for the speech. Everyone, please join me for one round of applause for all of you. Was this debate recorded? I